my name is Meghan Skarzynski. I'm one of the Hackworth Fellows for the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming back to campus Brian Wargo and Kevin Beals, CEO and CFO of Nearbuy Systems. Graduates of the class of 1995, Kevin and Brian have 15 years of experience in the Silicon Valley. Today we will be talking about startup ethics. So, the first question, are there any ethical challenges that you think are unique to starting a company as opposed to running an existing venture?
Absolutely. So, when you're starting a company, the first thing is it usually is, an idea, much less, with an existing venture, you've got products and customers and things. So when you have an idea and you're marketing an idea, it can change pretty rapidly. You can kind of start off in one direction, you get some input, and you move to another direction, which termed in the industry today is pivoting. So you can change pretty quickly. So when you've kind of convinced someone to come join you, you might have convinced them on one kind of path and plan, and as you kind of go down, you might be shifting. So there almost is a responsibility not be only communicating to the industry, the people that you're working with, but also your employees and the people that kind of come along for the ride, that you are taking these fundamental shifts and doing things that are different.
Wow, I came along for the ride. That's interesting. All right, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Would you have a comment on this?
No, I don't actually.
I think the other thing is, I don't know if we'll talk about this, but also when you're talking to employees about joining, many people are joining startups now for the equity position, so the idea that they're going to get ownership in the company. And there's always challenges with that because you kind of have to measure the people that you bring along. So your co-founders, you have a certain level of discussion. You sit around the table and you're kind of divvying up larger chunks of the enterprise. Whereas when you're talking to the first, second, third, in our case, engineers, those types of folks, you're looking at more about, okay, what's their potential kind of enterprise value as you move along? And someone with a certain skill set and certain background, you might measure one way, where someone else who might have a different background and might be more significant at the time, you might measure them a different way. And you might end up with very different equity structure and compensation structures for those folks. But I think you have to be very pragmatic because oftentimes the human element enters into these things. I like this person, so you naturally want to treat them different than someone else. Hey, this guy's capable, but he's kind of a jerk, or he's kind of different. You might want to treat them differently. But when you're building out a company, those things get around pretty quickly. So you have to be very conscious about how you're structuring things, how you're setting up things to make sure that you don't cause problems for yourself later down the road.
Definitely, that makes sense. Do you have anything to add?
I actually don't. I don't know why I'm completely blanking on this question.
Okay, no worries at all. What's the ethical way to interact with investors when pitching your company?
I want you start this one since you're the financial guy.
Well, I guess the second part of the question is, how do you accurately report your financials without sounding like an unattractive venture? That's an interesting discussion that Brian and I have constantly when we're going through our financials. You want to. You're showing 5 years out, and we don't really know what our actual financials are going to be a quarter out, let alone 5 years out.
Right.
But we need to show something that is attractive to the financial community, but at the same time has to be something that we feel is attainable, that we're going to put our name to. So Brian, as the CEO, always wants us to be showing that we're a billion-dollar company in year 3, and I want to show that we're profitable in year 2.
Exactly.
So it's a constant dilemma that we go through, and we kind of have to work together and meet our middle ground, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think I draw the line in two ways. There's the model that you're pitching, and there's an operating plan that you want to execute to. And those two things don't necessarily connect. There's a big gray area that fits in the middle of it. And so, I'd say the model is the more important thing that you're pitching to investors, that says, here's how this opportunity scales. Here's how we can really, with a 12-person company, attack a market that's being addressed by, a 10,000-person company today. Here are the things that we're going to do different that will allow us to, say, 5 years out to have $500 million in revenue, which is today still, back of the paper with a pencil. And, so how do you get there? Whereas when we talk about an operating plan, this gets down to headcount, how much we're going to pay people, how much we're going to pay vendors, what the cost of sales, how do we actually execute. So much more of a bottoms-up approach. And those operating plans are something that you want to put in front of your board, right? So once you have that investment to say, okay, for the next year, this is how we're going to execute. For the next quarter, this is what we're going to kind of plan to do. And it's very much more a blocking and tackling thing. And if we do all these things right in 12, 18, 24 months, we're going to hit this an acceleration point that is allow us going to, 5 years out to get to those much, much bigger revenue numbers that we're trying to target. But, those things are two different approaches, and I think you have to be, very explicit about that.
Right.
And I think that happens, but oftentimes when you're with investors, you're really talking about the model, and you're not really talking so much about the detailed operating plan until once they've already invested.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do you guys model ethical behavior in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's a great question for Kevin.
I think a lot of everything that I think about coming back to ethics is that this valley especially, and with Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all the social media that's out there, this valley is so small, and you just have to it's almost like you just have to be ethical, and if you're not, it's going to come back and get you sometime later. So whatever you do is going to come back and either affect you positively or affect you negatively going forward. So I firmly believe that. I know Brian believes that. We come from Santa Clara. We were taught by the Jesuits, so of course we were taught how to be ethical. But I think for us, we certainly speak openly about all issues with our employees, but we speak openly with each other as well. And if we treat each other and the rest of our employees fairly and ethically, it just kind of permeates the culture of the company, and that's how it kind of flows through to the rest of the organization. So we just have to be the ones to kind of start it, and then the rest of the company will take over.
Maintain it.
Yeah, so word of mouth, that was the ethical watchguard of the past, right? So if you had a bad experience with someone or some other thing, you're much more likely to repeat that to your peers and your friends. And so that's what happened in the Valley, is that there was several influencers or personal networks. So if someone had a bad experience with an investor, or an investor had a bad experience with an entrepreneur, it got out to a certain extent. Now, to Kevin's point, the world has been flattened by these media types, and so the information flow just happens so much dramatically quicker and so much wider berth that you have to, the watchdog is even more better to react to things. In terms of modeling ethical behavior too, I think it's, as Kevin mentioned, it starts at the top. When you start a company, it's how I interact with Kevin and my other founders, how open and honest are we with each other, that will flow through the company. And I've worked with a lot of companies, other startup companies, that had very different perspectives on ethics. It was about the person on the top, and it was about making money, or it was about certain ways that they act. And to this day, companies I've been with, you can see that ethics proceeds within that company, and it kind of takes on a persona within those organizations.
Yeah, that's so great that you guys operate the right way. Do you openly speak about ethics at work?
I don't know if we would call it ethics. I think what we openly speak about is, hey, are we being honest with each other? We run into issues. Every startup runs an issue. We've been at our current startup for a year now, and we've had some ups and downs, and it's been interesting, as all of them always are, right? So, I don't think we would ever explicitly say, hey, let's time to talk about ethics. It's more like, hey, what about this person and what they're doing or saying? We don't like it because, we felt that they, have signed up for these things or didn't sign up for these things, and this is how they're behaving. So I think it becomes a much more practical or tactical discussion around ethics than the general conversation itself.
Yeah, I think about a situation that we had with Nearbuy, where we had an employee who was on an H-1B visa. So he was an Indian national, and his visa was with us, and there was a time a few months ago when we weren't sure if we were going to be a going entity anymore, if we were going to be able to continue on. So, it was in our best interest to keep this guy as long as possible working with us, but at the end of the day, the most important thing for him is to make sure that his immigration status was okay, that he wasn't going to have to get shipped out back home to India or anything like that. So what we did was we were very upfront with him very early in the process, and told him what was going on, and said, we love you, we want you to stay as long as we can have you, but at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself first, and we have to make sure that you're taken care of. So, and I think that the other employees knew that we were having that discussion with him, the other founders knew we were having that, so that's something that hopefully will kind of, again, permeate through the organization as we continue to grow, that they know that we have their individual best interest in, first and foremost over the company. Whereas, we all want the company to be successful, but at the end of the day, we have to take care of these people who have become our friends and our coworkers.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics. We really appreciate you guys coming back on campus.
Thank you.
No problem.